Hi and welcome to Movies Suck. Well, wow, there is a lot going on at the minute. I have come across this story on Bounding into Comics, which I thought was very, very interesting in this current day and age. People actually realizing what is going on with politics and what is going on with social dynamics and what is going on in the culture war is rather odd. It's a strange thing to come across these days. Mostly people are just being woke and pandering and pathetic. So it's actually nice to see someone somewhere standing their ground and actually doing something good for once. Doing something good and right and honest and moral for once. It's just fantastic to see. So, without further ado, let's get to the article. Cirsova, I'm not sure the exact pronunciation. It could be Cursova, but I'm going to go with Cirsova. Cirsova Publishing recognizes science fiction and fantasy writers of America as a terrorist organization. Now that is a hell of a title to a story. One company, magazine in this case, has recognized another company as a terrorist organization. I didn't realize that we could all just recognize whatever company, whatever, as terrorist organizations all on our own. I'm going to have to write my own list of terrorist organizations out and publish it because that sounds like a fascinating idea. So, let's get on with it. Cirsova Publishing, the company behind Wild Stars and the Cirsova Science Fiction magazine, announced that they were recognizing the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, the SFWA, as a terrorist organization. The move comes after Cirsova and a number of other science fiction authors condemned SFWA's new Black Lives Matter action plan. I've read it, it's pretty horrifying, really. Cirsova made the announcement on Twitter, writing, Cirsova Publishing has adopted the official policy to recognize Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America as a terrorist organization. The tweet links to a blog post where Cirsova explains their decision to recognize the SFWA as a terrorist organization, citing their association with Black Lives Matter. The blog post specifically points out SFWA's Black Lives Matter action plan. So, their action plan is, people who say change is impossible are usually pretty happy with things just the way they are. Okay, this is from the SFWA, obviously. These are the actions that SFWA is taking as first steps to clean our own house and work towards making our community safer for black writers. I didn't realize that SFWA was so unsafe for black writers. So I didn't realize there was any community that wasn't safe for black writers. I imagine a black writer in the KKK is probably going to be a little bit less safe than normal, but anywhere else in the world, well, at least in the West, they are completely safe. So, for the month of June, 100% of registrations for the 2020 Nebula Convention online content will go directly to the Carl Brandon Society and the Black Speculative Fiction Society. We are creating a matching program for the 2020 Nebula Convention online so that each registration purchase this month creates a seat for a black writer. For the next year, we are waiving fees for SFWA membership for black writers. We are waiving registration fees for next year's Nebula Conference attendance for black writers. We are creating a travel fund to help defer the costs of black writers attending the Nebula Conference. We are committing to reaching out to black-led science fiction and fantasy organizations about applying for the additional grant money that we have available. That's very specific, isn't it? It's nothing about equal opportunities or anything else. This is extremely one way and only one way, because obviously no one else needs any help. I imagine they'd much rather have Will Smith's children applying than, those other people, the wrong people. Anyway, Cirsova explains, while SFWA's decision to discriminate based on race in a desperate attempt to become diverse is a gross and shallow attempt to remain relevant and deflect criticism of their organization and their members' behavior and survive the contemporary ideological purges going on the left side of the political spectrum, their pledge of support for terrorist organizations is beyond abhorrence. They then go on to explain that Black Lives Matter is committing terrorist acts everywhere, that where Black Lives Matter goes, destruction, vandalism, violence and hatred, largely carried out by white allies aiming to create further racial divides in the country, follow in its wake. Not content to keep their violence and destruction in public places and businesses over the weekend, hundreds of protesters broke into a private neighborhood to threaten and menace the residents, Cirsova continued. We've all seen the footage of that as well. That was pretty terrible. Can you imagine being out there eating your lunch and a bunch of nutters break into your garden and start marching up and down and shouting at you? Any normal person would have done exactly what they did. Unfortunately, you can't do that here in England due to the fact that no one has guns, at least no one who isn't a farmer for the most part. But you can understand why they'd want to arm themselves. 200 people break in and start protesting on your lawn and threatening you. Yeah, I think they did the right thing. Cirsova then states, "This is the kind of terrorism that SFWA supports." They add, "And it's for this reason that Cirsova Publishing has officially adopted the policy of recognizing the SFWA as a terrorist organization." Cirsova then urges authors to sever their relationships with SFWA. "We strongly recommend that any authors with good conscience leave this malign organization. We strongly recommend that authors considering membership avoid it." They also indicate they will no longer be considering submissions from SFWA authors. While we will not make it a policy to ask, Cirsova Publishing will no longer consider submissions from new authors with SFWA credentials in the biomaterials they send us, until the organization takes a real stand against racism and disavows and ceases supporting domestic terrorist groups. On Twitter, they reiterated that writers sever ties with this racist pro-terror organization. And for their submission policy towards SFWA, they indicate it will be a don't ask, don't tell policy. In other words, they won't ask you if you're in the SFWA, and as long as you don't tell them, everything will be fine. Of course, I guess if they find out some other way later on, then it may be trouble, but I imagine they won't ask, so as long as you don't say anything and no one else says anything, it's all fine. We are also against discrimination, so we are adopting a don't ask, don't tell policy regarding the SFWA. We will not ask authors about their SFWA status, but we will treat submissions including SFWA credentials no differently than if someone said, "Hello, I'm a KKK Kleagle, here's my story." I don't know what the hell a Kleagle is, but it sounds bad. At least the KKK bit obviously makes it bad. In a follow-up tweet, they wrote, "Supporting violent groups whose aim is to aggravate racial tensions and foster animosity against African Americans is not supporting blacks. We are sorry that you feel this way." Exactly. Black Lives Matter does not support blacks. It's just a communist, anarchic terror organization that seeks to belittle and destroy Western civilization. So far as we can see, it's just another way to go about it. Antifa have been trying for ages, and this is basically just Antifa with another slogan. Anyway, let's have a look at Cirsova's website, because they actually have a more detailed explanation here of their position. So let's have a read. "Everyone remotely right of center was made to own what happened in Charlottesville. But suggesting an organization like SFWA that explicitly supports the groups behind the violence ravaging communities across America bore any responsibility was beyond the pale. The best any of the shrieking crazies could come up with was, 'You must be racist,' or essentially parroting that old Donald Trump 'there were good people' line we were endlessly told was bullshit and a lie. What is happening in America now is not just orchestrated, it is a damn symphony being conducted against black Americans. Conflate the struggles of African Americans with the political desires of radical ANCOMs, who are, ironically, mostly white. Create destruction in black communities, costing jobs, livelihoods, and opportunity. That destruction and risk poisons the well to any outside investment in those communities, further depressing them. By tying this destruction to a black identity movement, the orchestrators know average Americans will become prone to lose their sympathies for black Americans. Politicians, activists, the media, and global corporations are all behind and supporting this effort to destroy black America under the guise of saving it. These politicians, these corporations, these activists, these vampires, they want white people to blame blacks, because it will give them further cover for the destruction of the old orders. It's easy to become black-pilled on race relations, but I will not go black-pilled on black people, because I know too damn many badass black folks. People who have been friends, supporters, creatives, artists, and musicians who are the coolest people in the world. And that is why I believe it is worth it to stand up against vampires in BLM, SFWA, and every other woke organization out there. This is Movies Suck saying, please people, get a grip and understand what is happening in modern society today. We are on the edge of a cataclysm, and it really feels like we could slip over. Let's hope things get back to a sensible, sane standpoint. Signing out. Leave a like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.